Hi, I'm Rochelle Gentile, president of the Dubuque Symphony Orchestra League. I'm here at the Dubuque Golf and Country Club, kicking off our virtual Soundbites series. Under normal circumstances, you'd be right here with me, enjoying a great lunch and a preview of the DSO's upcoming concert, and I'm sure you will be again soon. As you may know, the DSOL develops and administers projects, programs, and events that provide music education opportunities to folks of all ages, as well as financial support to the DSO and its youth ensemble programs. Each year, the League contributes support to youth education events and programs such as the 3rd and 5th grade Arts Trek concerts, the 4th grade Adopt a Musician program, the Youth Concerto competition, the Dubuque Symphony Youth Ensembles, and the Summer String Camp. Along with our many other endeavors is our Senior Classics program, now in its 9th year, providing performances by DSO musicians to entertain residents and their families at local nursing homes and assisted living centers. While the past year has looked a little different, we continue to focus our efforts on fundraising. We encourage and welcome you to join us in our 54th year of supporting the DSO. Please check out the DSO's website for more information about how you can get involved. We hope to see you soon, but before I go, I'd like to introduce our esteemed music director and conductor, Dr. William Intriligator.
Thank you, Rochelle, and hello, everybody. I'm excited to be telling you a little bit more about our Classics 2 program coming up in March here. And today I'm going to talk about George Walker's Lyric for Strings, a gorgeous piece for string orchestra. And when we perform it on the Classics 2 program, because of social distancing, we will have to have a smaller than normal orchestra in the strings. But this piece was actually originally written for a string quartet, so it will do well with a smaller sized string orchestra. Very much like Barber's Adagio for strings, which also started as a string quartet, this piece started as a slow movement of a string quartet written when the composer was very young. And like the Barber's Adagio, became one of his most famous pieces. It has a lot in common with the Barber's Adagio, not just in terms of those biographical points, but also in the spirit of the piece, the emotional intensity of the piece, the kind of overall trajectory and the kind of yearning and the overlapping string lines and the searching for hope. One wonders if George Walker actually knew of Barber's Adagio when he wrote this piece in 1946. This piece is gorgeous. And I'm so excited to feature it on our concerts, not just because of the music itself, but also because it is part of our effort to continue to promote music by underrepresented groups. George Walker was the first African-American composer to win the Pulitzer Prize in Music. He had an incredible talent as a concert pianist and a composer. And it seems as though because of discrimination, he never had the career that he could have had as a concert pianist and also as a composer. I mean, although he was recognized with the Pulitzer Prize much later in his life, it's still probably because of discrimination that his name is not a household name among American 20th century composers. Actually, he was a 20th and a 21st century composer. He lived a great long life. He only passed away, about 3 years ago at the age of, I think it was 97. Yeah. But this piece was written a long time ago, in 1946. One wonders if the emotional intensity might have been a response to the devastation from World War II. But actually, I think it's a more personal musical expression, because he dedicated the piece to his grandmother who had just passed away. Malvina King was her name. She had originally been a slave when she was young. She used to tell stories about being a slave to her grandson, George Walker, who then may have put some of that feeling into this piece when he wrote this as basically a lament after she died, and dedicated it to her. In fact, the original title of this piece was Lament when it first premiered outside of the string quartet. And he was very clear that it was an elegy for his grandmother. Then he thought that that would be too limiting and that the piece isn't just a sad piece. It's a beautiful piece. And he didn't want it to be pigeonholed as being just a piece in memory of somebody, just a sort of elegiac piece. And so then he changed the title to, I think he changed it to Adagio, like the Barber. And then he changed it again, finally, to Lyric for Strings. And so the current title, Lyric for Strings, was actually the third title of the piece. I'm just double checking it here. Yeah, originally it was the second movement of a string quartet. And at first it was called Lament when it was performed by itself. Then, because that might have been too delimiting, he renamed it Adagio, and then finally Lyric. Yeah. Actually, George Walker wrote something in the score here. He says, after a brief introduction, the principal theme that permeates the entire work is introduced by the first violins. A static interlude is followed by successive imitations of the theme that lead to an intense climax. It is intense. The final section of the work presents a somewhat more animated statement of the same original theme, and the coda recalls the quiet interlude that had appeared earlier. Yeah, it's such a beautiful piece. Let's listen to a little bit of it here. This is from a YouTube recording from the BBC Proms in 2017. Ooh, there's a pungent sort of dissonant note there, isn't it? It's so gorgeous. And here's the main theme coming in right here. Such a beautiful piece. Actually, I do recommend that recording on YouTube, which is a gorgeous recording. One of the other neat things about this piece is that it has an unusual key signature. Well, first, let me back up and say that it's unusual that in 1946, a young composer trying to prove himself like George Walker actually wrote in a key signature, because that was a time of experimental modernism in classical music circles, atonal music, serial music, and other kinds of effects. But George Walker, maybe in a brave attempt, wrote something very tonal. Yes, there are some pungent dissonances, as I alluded to earlier when we were listening. Those make the music even more intense, much in a way like Barber's Adagio. But the key signature of this piece, the sort of the home key, is so unusual. It's F sharp major. If you know anything about music, you might know that when you hear pieces of music, you often hear C major, D major, G major, A major, C minor, D minor. Rarely do you ever hear of a piece that is in the key of F sharp major. It's so unusual. The only other piece that I can think of that comes to mind right away, I'm sure there are others, but the one that comes to mind right away that is in the key of F sharp is Haydn's Farewell Symphony. You remember the Haydn Farewell Symphony? We did it a number of years ago in Dubuque. It's the one where it's written in the score where the musicians slowly, one by one, leave the stage until it's like an empty stage. It's a sort of musical farewell and a musical kind of joke. It was a kind of a message to his employer that the musicians had stayed too long in their summer residence. They wanted to go home to see their families. I wonder if George Walker knew about the key of the Farewell Symphony. And as he wrote this piece, thinking about his grandmother who had just passed away, whether this was a musical farewell as well. I'm sure you're going to enjoy George Walker's Lyric for Strings.